A world full of stories, the future's changing. Reach out your hand and grasp your own fate. These are my complete records of the Göttershexe. May they prove helpful to whomever may find them in the future. I have written down all my life in the hope that it can change the outcome that was set in stone. I do not know what this will entail for the world, or if it will ever achieve anything. But please, at least, listen to this long story of someone who has lost this game. Discord and breakdown. The thought experiment on what would happen without magic was not something contained to only our class. It quickly spread like a wildfire amongst the first year. Judging from the reactions of the higher students, this seemed to be part for the course every year. This idea gets brought up and then the entire year talks about it for a week, give or take, all focused around the epicenter that is Professor Newlek. Her class hears of it. They tell their friends during their other classes or simply after school. And they also try to come up with a solution. And eventually the idea fades again, like any trend does. Everyone had to take some stance. That was just how parasitic this idea was. Some had weak attachment to the subject, but no one could completely ignore the idea. And the more days passed, the more thought through became the idea. And naturally would all of this also include our class of hot-headed people who all lacked the critical part of a filter between their brain and mouth. All 8 who were here besides me were on it, with Senri once again missing, a habit she had developed quickly with no one of us knowing where she vanished to. This discussion was also then a historical event for the world, as against all plausibility, surely having to break 1 or 2 universal rules, did Zon Fei and Han Peng have the same opinion. This awkward situation was something that got even worse considering that the groups that had gathered around them naturally opposed each other and as such took opposite opinions. But here are the ringleaders sharing one. For them this discussion had now simply become to a cross-examination on why the other lies, simply to make a fool on the one who would give in. If you are so convinced that there would only be humans when there is no magic, then what do you think about the rise of primitive technology, giving humans the incentive to hunt down other intelligent races, as those would most impede their resources? Surely any other race would do this as well. Also at some point did people start to simply accepting that if would it be humans that survive as the sole intelligent race? With so many people talking about it, was it bound to change to some degree, and saying human was definitely more easy and closer to home than one intelligent race, and it would feel strange to argue for why humans wouldn't exist, so it made sense that this would happen. Indeed I am. I'm amazed that the monkey in your brain was able to clap his cymbals just right for the sound of that to sound like something intelligent. And now you're holding it in front of me pretending as if it was not the only solution a person would get to if they had even one brain cell, trying to make me reconsider and make a fool of myself. In terms of our class overall opinion, did most of us agree quickly that the one race theory would be most fitting. Not all started there, but they did convert quickly, after giving it some thought and in a very progressive way accepted their wrongs and their opposite arguments as a good proof of theirs being faulty. There were 2 exceptions to this, however. Selene held strong to her side for a long time before she changed sides, but the 2 who couldn't be convinced were Senri and Tim of all people. This really did bring a problem with it, as normally would the two younger brothers be the one at odds, with the entire scene being solved by the big one. But now, the one to bring balance to the world was the one that brought chaos. Come on guys, in the end it's not like we can change the result either way. Magic exists and that's gonna stay that way for the foreseeable future. You could even say it would be magic if it suddenly changed. You're not helping if you're just making bad jokes. And you were so big on defending the other side before. You're just acting childish. Sure then, from one child to another, you would be able to enlighten me in these dark times of confusion. It is so hard to see how the world correctly works as small child. Then I will enlighten you. Obviously humans would be the only ones to survive, because we could take up all the space before anyone else could, and they have no longer any way to fend us off. But didn't we learn that humans developed slower than any other? Shouldn't we be the ones who couldn't fight back? Well, that argument never had to be about humans being the only one. I'm just saying this because everyone suddenly started talking like it was the case, and I'm just making it easier for all to understand. Surely you don't think we would believe this when your nose grew just 1 centimeter longer? Wait, what? For real? But I didn't lie! With Tom hastily filling out his nose, as if it actually could grow from just saying some wrong words, did Tim have a great laugh over him, while Tim was more on the end of satisfaction that he this easily could snuff out when his brother was talking haphazardly, even if Tim did not stutter or seemingly thought about his words for even a bit before he said them, easily fooling anyone who was not exactly called Tim.Ponsan. On the other side, did this excursion not stop Aþpan from arguing, or even acknowledging that there was an intrusion to begin with? But consider this, if there were some superforce out there that came to conquer all, that would force others to come together opposing so that they can survive as individuals. It is something that has happened countless times in human history, and now you are arguing it wouldn't apply here? What ridiculously flawed argumentation! And your argument lacks any ground to stand on to begin with. You are talking about humans banding together with humans to fight humans. The very first thing you should have learned is how magical creatures do not care for others, even if we had threatened their very existence, which we didn't, and they all banded together, which they wouldn't. Would all of this just hinge on the idea that they realize this before it is already too late? Outside of Aþpan, none of us had such strong feelings that they felt the need to take part in the discussion, but every now and then, when we picked up where we thought any incredibly bad argumentation, unable to resist the urge to oppose that idea, with what is considered a bad argument being up to the eyes of the beholder. Of course, was of us Tim the one most used to meddle in others' arguments, being in a family that had a healthy amount of arguments to all that life had to offer. But everyone wants to survive, so why wouldn't they work together? In the end, would they surely see the threat as relevant to them, and even if they don't band together, if simply all attack at the same time, would humans stand no chance? But even if everyone knows that, do people always act completely straight when they are in such a situation? Brother's right. If humans would constantly expand, would everyone eventually reach a breaking point? It is not as if we had a great weapons back then. You are ignoring the time span. It is not as if these things happen overnight. It takes a long time for generations to spread that much. You could even say a lifetime. I know everyone has their own opinions, but could you at least be a bit more reasonable? We don't need to fight each other over something like this. I am perfectly reasonable. She simply isn't. Kiss already! You little runt! You think that's funny? Just imagining any physical contact with her makes my skin burn. Please don't agitate them even more, Tim. You shouldn't also take part in their fighting. But how could we possibly know how they act when being driven to extinction? It is not like we have some example for that. But Tom, aren't you right now just arguing against what you said 3 seconds ago? Tom is right, however. Arguing amounts to nothing more of value for such an extreme case. But we are told to argue about this. You aren't told anything, Tim. Only Aþpan and Henry are in Professor Newleck's class. Even if I couldn't disagree with this being a good idea to do anyways. It's always most fun to talk about things without any reason, than having to stress over having to find a solution that will affect things. When going about something as unpredictable as this, can we only make assumptions and follow their logical conclusion. That means only arguments that can be well defined have any worth. You couldn't know how anyone would act when being on the verge of extinction, so it doesn't help us talking about such things. This exercise is about applying the knowledge we have and how that would play a role in this situation. Before having done so, lacks this the solid grounds to argue past that point. Most start at the end and think about what would happen instead of how it would happen. That is the crucial difference between a solid opinion and heartless argumentations. But Aþpan, weren't you from the get-go on the unwavering side of humans being the only ones that would come out to be? You're like a chimpanzee trying to lecture a gorilla about the correct use of Chinese porcelain. Out of place and soon hunted down by 2 gorillas. And who are you calling a gorilla? I guess I'm an orangutan that should have left long ago. Was that correct, gorilla? For please don't hurt me, I'm not so very worse in the way of the jungle. There are many reasons why I'm convinced about the most alien outcome. It is not like I'm someone who is just grasping at straws when thinking about this. I would not waste effort to think about something I can't come to any conclusion, and I won't take a stand for something I'm unsure about the correct course of action. But I guess that explanation would I never need to give to Lapis, with Senri entering the dormitory the way she does, coming back from wherever as usual, or rather as unusual this time. It is not as if we would question why someone would go back to the dorm, no matter when that may be so. The first time did we not even think about it, when she came back when it was already long past classes having ended. I am also not sharing all my classes with her, so I couldn't guess how or where to she vanishes after school. What tripped us up this time was the distinct lack of ignorant friendliness that was so typical for Senri, as if she could hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Now Lapis monkey metaphors are even evading my thoughts. Everyone felt it, the shift in aura, and their reactions were clear as day on this. And it was not just her having another look on her face. It was something we've gotten so used to that the distinct lack of it was unnerving. Whenever Senri was in the room, the atmosphere was changing, as if the world itself was warping around her in mysterious and incomprehensible ways. As usual was she quietly entering and trying to quietly become part of the background. But this time was she not given the chance, with everyone going silent once they felt this feeling of something being wrong. And then, shortly after realizing that it was due to Senri being here without the typical aura of hers, something that just didn't set right with anyone, this feeling of something being uncontrollably wrong, something was not as it was supposed to be, this simply wasn't right, was the only way to explain it. In the shock was it Selene who spoke up. She may be timid, but that was something I began to doubt more and more, the more I saw her act. She was simply not valuing herself. That is what my understanding on her started to become. What happened? It was unsure if it was because of Selene asking with her quiet voice. But even in chaos and outside of the unusual silence that had sat right now, did Senri somehow always seem to perfectly understand anyone. But she was also not someone who would ignore a person that was directly talking to her.
Someone has to do something. Come on, brother, you're good with this type of stuff. Yes, you have to do something. You always know how to help the two of us if we have a problem.
I don't know if I can. It is not as if I am some emotional mastermind. I know you two guys for longer than even yourself know yourself. This just isn't my expertise. I'm more of the hit me until you are feeling good again guy. Move aside. If no one else does it, let me go in there.
Hold it right there! Your usual self is more than enough for anyone when they're in a good mood.
I would like to help, but of us all should be the one who knows their best help. So it is all on me. This was of course what I expected, but I simply didn't know how to handle the scenario. It is difficult to judge Senri's actions, and we didn't even know what she was up to all the time she vanished.
Why are you talking in third person? You are acting even weirder than normal.
If you already knew you should do something, why didn't you do it already? You're the guy who brought her, so no one here knows her better than you. So play your part for once, and do more than just standing around and observing. At this moment, Aþpan held his mouth. Some things aren't meant to be said out loud. This is what he was always told. You need to think about everything to the utmost detail, but never tell anyone. His brother was the one to follow succession, but nonetheless got it hard like him, from small on, with not one day of freedom from this indoctrination. And once he reached the age where he was realizing what was happening, was it already too late, with every being shaped to his father's liking. Against his will did he act like he was supposed to do. You need to consider, but only tell that what is needed. That way you keep the power to change any situation at will. You need to be calm and never let emotions guide you, but you need to look like everyone else. They need to think that you are just like them, or they won't accept you. Keep anyone close at hand, never getting someone too close to block any opinion you have, but also never letting anyone get too far away so that you can no longer predict them. His rebellion of becoming a mage was nothing more than a temporary phase. The seed that was planted in him was too strong to keep from blooming, and eventually would he realize that this phase needed to end. The reason why his father let him go without fighting was because he could never escape his clutches on his own, and any person he might meet would he instinctively treat in a way that prevented them from ever helping him. It was an absolute truth, so his father thought. He had seen many things over his time, and was able to handle many situations without issue. At the end is all lives the same. They act to gain more of what they want, and if they don't, then they simply die out. You cannot survive through altruism. If you understand that, do you understand every person's action? So what if there was a life that wouldn't act after the very fundamental concept he was taught? It happened slowly, and the shell did not break immediately. Even now, there's nothing more than a small crack to see. But Senri, that person that acted so not self-interested, was something that didn't fit in this world Aþpan was taught about. At first was it just the instinct of needing to understand her, so that if the day comes, he would have access to her. But over time, and the more she shown him how uncategorizable her every actions were, the less did he seek out to know her for his father's doctrine, and the more did he seek her out for his own will. The shell broke, and beneath it was Aþpan the person, someone who was just like everyone else, and not some robot to be programmed by his father's will. Just this one moment, when the shock of the lack of what should be there hit him, could he no longer differentiate between the voice of the inside and his own, and so he spoke out loud what was meant to be hidden forever, and the voice that was to dictate his life's every action had subsided. Yes, I think it is best for me to go in, though don't expect too much. I may know her longer, but not that much more. For me, she is just as much an enigma as she is for yours. Well, at least you are the most calm and calculated of us all. You just know how to handle situations well. Aþpan let out a dry chuckle to Lapis' remark before he entered Fenrir's room, feeling how everyone behind him was staring to figure out what happened. Did he decide it would be best to close the door behind him? Fenrir, I know you don't like talking about where you go when you vanish like that, but we really are worried about you and what has happened that you feel so miserable.
I just asked them and now they hate me.
Fenrir was looking at Aþpan with a sad look, yet was it strangely different from how normal people would look sad. Aþpan could not find out in his mind any comparable look. To him was Fenrir in an absolutely every aspect treading new territory. Ask who? No, it's more important to ask what you ask them. Aþpan already had some idea on what and who Fenrir would have asked, but it would be best for her to say it herself. He was taught the act of manipulating people very well, but this time would Aþpan use this curse to do something good? If Fenrir would say this herself, would she be more at ease with talking about the situation? This is what Aþpan was targeting at with his question. That was also why he quickly changed his question from who to what, as Fenrir was not the type of person who would feel at ease to call people anything specific. She was seeing everything different to normal human, and did not have this natural born instinct of needing to have to put a name on things that she didn't understand.
I asked them what Professor Newlake did, and now they all hate me.
Fenrir was a person who was naturally gifted at understanding how others feel. This truth was what confused Aþpan at first, but being the person he was, it did not take long for him to come up with why they had this reaction. While Fenrir may be odd, was she still human and therefore would not have the basic ways of thinking that magical creatures have. A stark contrast that broke Fenrir's way of always being able to put herself in others' place. That Aþpan knew very well. We would prosper under a lack of magic, where magical creatures go extinct. This is a real fear of magic societies. Aþpan recollected these words from Professor Newlake. She had clearly said it, but what Aþpan presumed was that with how Fenrir's way of thinking works, so Aþpan proposed, would she not be able to fully grasp what these words mean, and she is simply acting out of a scarily good feeling. I think you should just give it some time. Magical creatures aren't the ones to hold grudges over words. As long as they aren't physically affected by it, is it of little concern to them. That's what we learned in both history and magical creatures, didn't we?
But I don't understand. Why do they hate me?
Aþpan had his presumption being verified, but he was wrong that Fenrir was able to place herself in others' place. This misunderstanding would be something he would have to wait a long time for to get solved, and so would he come to make many wrong assumptions on Fenrir's actions in the future, but right now was he close enough to the truth to be able to handle the situation, and so would Aþpan grow in ways he was not intended to. Just think of it like this. For us is all of this just a fun thought experiment, but for magical creatures it is the same as if you would ask them of what they would think of a world in which they all die. They have nothing to gain from it, so it is offensive of even mentioning it.
Dude, you can't just say it like that. Poor Fenrir can't just take the full truth this abruptly. Maybe you weren't the correct choice after all.
I guess nothing ever stopped him from opening the door. outside of some sort of respect that I strangely had placed on them, very well knowing that this would be the outcome. I was aware that they were listening as good as they could. In the end, it seemed they felt like they should give their 2 cents as well. The twist that I appreciated, as it was a good distraction for Senri. If she truly thinks like magical creatures, surely she would forget about all of this by tomorrow, and be once more in oblivion, a strange and happy force of good. Senri, don't listen to what that philosopher has to say. Just go and say sorry, and everything is going to be good again. No matter how much we two get at each other, we always know to respect an honest sorry. Anyone who couldn't do that is not worth hanging out with. I could also just show them they're wrong. Ouch! What was that for?
I'm not so good If you explain yourself, I will understand.
So you would try it if you
You
could.
didn't mean any harm.
If you want, could I come with you? I don't know much about what to do in these cases, but I'm sure we can figure something out. Just always keep in mind that this class won't let anyone behind. If one of us has a problem, that is all of our problems. Isn't that the case? No matter who it is, everyone would help out. If I wouldn't help out that brute, I would just be a knight with no one to protect others what not to do. All of this seemed to work on Senri. I have the feeling that up until now Senri was still unsure on how to think about this class. But this had now become clear to her. Everyone that is part of the off class is a fixed part of it, for the better or the worse. She probably was always different from others, and with that always felt like no one could connect to her but the magical creatures she interacted with. In the end, would it be now bad to mention her evenly traveled? So I will need to wait to figure out where these magical creatures would be she interacts with. The shears are one thing as they constantly roam around, and even if it would be interesting to see how well she does with the Ratatoska from the get-go, do I have the feeling that this is about more than just those. It was just for a short moment, and no one else realized what Aþpan did, but there was a gaze that had specifically focused on him. When Aþpan tried to figure out from what direction he felt the gaze, did he realize that it came from elsewhere, a direction humans could not perceive, but it was too short to make out more about it. Were those eyes? So he does watch me in the end after all. I guess I underestimated how confident he is and how much of a control freak he is. He will not allow me to walk anywhere without having his hands in my way, but just watch me shatter that confidence of yours.